If indeed Huawei's equipment is a potential Trojan horse for Chinese espionage, it's not the only way in which Beijing hopes to exert greater control over cyberspace. There is, of course, the somewhat porous Great Firewall of China that aims to filter the flow of information into and out of the country. But plans are afoot to go further and reconfigure the basis of the entire global internet. Dominique Lazanski is a cybersecurity and standards consultant based here in London.
The internet works based on a protocol that was developed over 30 years ago. And it's basically a network of networks that's global. And the great part about the internet is that it's resilient. If there's a part of the internet that goes down or suffers a major attack, the traffic on the internet will be automatically rerouted another way. So because of COVID-19, we've all been working from home and using the internet almost 30% more than normal. And the internet's able to handle that because of the way that it's set up in a very decentralized way.
So it's kind of an amorphous web of connections, and there are many different routes by which information can travel. But these protocols you're talking about, that's kind of an agreed language that's used across the whole internet to say, here is some data, this is where it needs to go, please send it some route to get to where it needs to be.
That's exactly correct. It's called TCPIP, and it's been the foundation of the internet for years.
TCPIP, there's a lot of jargon in the internet,
I know.
Now, who's in charge of all this?
No one single person is in charge. Obviously, we've got community networks and industries and companies like Google and people that run core networks. Everybody is in charge.
So it sounds like the internet's basically historically grown quite organically, and this TCP/IP is just like a common language that it's suited everybody to adopt. It's not been organised top-down at all.
No, it hasn't. It started out as sort of a side project in the US and the Department of Defense.
Now, China is trying to change all this, isn't it?
It is. China's trying to change how the internet works from a technical perspective, but also from a governance perspective. The Chinese government would prefer to have a more top-down authoritarian control. So what they're trying to do is come up with a more what they call modern network that's more of a linear sort of telephone network type thing where you have traffic goes from A to B, and there's no way to reroute it. So they always know where devices are and always know where the traffic is going. This could potentially cause security issues in that there's more of a single point of failure.
So it's less robust because if the data has to follow a prescribed path from point A to point B, if there's any interruption of that path for accidental or nefarious reasons, then there's no ability for it to find a different route like it would do under the current setup.
Exactly.
And presumably if you prescribe the route that the data can take, then it's also easier for you to listen in on that data, to filter out things you don't like, etc.
Yeah, and it also adheres to the laws in China where the government has to be able to access data from any company or any individual by law.
But I mean, China is one country, obviously it's a very large, important country, and nonetheless it's only one country. How has it been able to get the rest of the world to even agree to this?
They're being supported by a group of 77 countries, like Africa and developing countries, and Russia as well. And it hasn't been agreed to yet, but it's starting to happen through what's called standards organizations. And standards organizations are the ways that globally people agree to the way a network router might be developed or a building process might be developed. However, China's taken advantage of a UN-based standards organization to start pushing this technology.
So you mentioned earlier about various developing, particularly African countries, supporting China's efforts in this. What's in it for them?
Well, through the Belt and Road Initiative, we've seen a lot of free development, right? So a country might say, well, we don't have any fiber. And a company might come in and say, great, we'll build it out for you, either for free or at a very low cost. But you have to use this technology or you have to use our equipment. And here's the standards we want you to adhere to. But putting the UN stamp on these standards means that they're able to trade more freely than they would otherwise.
And it sounds like this is where Huawei comes into the picture, because Huawei presumably is one of those Chinese companies offering that equipment. In fact, probably the company, isn't it?
One of a few, but yes. And we've heard quite a lot about Huawei lately.
Is there an additional bonus to a government that this will also allow those governments to have more control over the internet within their borders, which I guess if you're a less democratic government or have more authoritarian leanings, that's quite an attractive proposition as well?
Yes. And I think we're seeing that globally as well, right? There's definitely been a split between what I would say is more Western versus Eastern approaches towards that kind of control from authoritarian countries over communications and the internet.
Dominique Lazanski,